The locks were changed before she even reached the door. Her husband stood beside his mistress while his family blocked the steps, calling her worthless, broke, lucky they ever took her in.
Leave this house and never come
The
back.
neighbors just stared. She said nothing, turned, and walked away, unaware that letting her leave was the biggest mistake of their lives. Her name was Nadia. She had worked a double shift that day, the kind that left her feet aching and her hands raw and smelling of bleach and cold coffee. She walked the last block home in the gray light of early evening, dreaming of nothing more than a warm shower and a quiet room. She did not know that quiet was the one thing she would never find in that house again. The street was the same as always. Mr. Coleman sweeping his porch 2 houses down. The Davis twins racing their bikes along the curb. It was an ordinary evening on an ordinary street, and that was the cruelest part of what came next. When she reached the front steps of the little blue house she had called home for 6 years, she pulled out her key and slid it into the lock. It would not turn. The lock was new. Bright brass against the old, worn wood. Someone had changed it while she was gone. She lifted her hand to knock. The door opened from the inside before her knuckles ever touched the wood, and there he stood. Marcus, her husband of 6 years. He did not smile now. He looked at her the way a man looks at a stranger who has knocked on the wrong door by mistake. Cold, distant, already gone. "Marcus," she said. "Baby, my key won't work. What happened to the lock?" "It's not your lock anymore," he said, before he had even fully opened the door. His voice was flat, like he'd rehearsed the line on the drive home. "Why do you keep acting surprised? You had to see this coming." Behind him, Simone leaned against the hallway wall, lips painted a deep red, the color of a stop sign, the color of a warning. "What is she doing here?" Nadia asked. Her voice stayed soft. It was always soft. "She's here because I want her here," Marcus said, which is more than I can say for how I felt about you most mornings, if I'm being honest. You should have seen your face just now. Almost funny. Before Nadia could answer, his mother appeared at his shoulder. Eleanor, a tall woman with a stiff back and a colder mouth. Beside her came Brielle, already filming, already grinning. "Your key won't work," Eleanor said, slow and clear so the whole street could enjoy them, "because you don't live here anymore." "I'm sorry," Nadia said. "I don't understand." "What is there to understand?" Eleanor stepped onto the porch. "You came into this family with nothing. No money, no name. We took you in. We fed you. And what did you ever bring through that door? Nothing. You are broke. You are worthless. You are lucky, girl, that we tolerated you as long as we did." The neighbors were watching now. Mr. Coleman had stopped sweeping. The Davis twins had skidded to a stop on their bikes. Nadia turned to Marcus one last time. "Marcus, tell them this is a mistake. Tell them to stop." Marcus did not drop his eyes this time. He held her gaze, almost bored. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he said. "I'm not the one who's confused here. I knew exactly what I wanted the day I packed your things. You were always the practice version of my life, Nadia. Simone is the real one." Simone slid her arm through his, lacing her fingers into his, claiming him right there on the porch. "I've already packed your things," Marcus said. "They're out on the lawn. It's better this way, for everybody, especially me." 6 years, Nadia said, more to herself than to him. 6 years, Marcus. "And every single one of them felt longer than the last," he said. "You want me to lie about that too? Fine, I'm sorry. There. Feel better?" 2 old suitcases and 3 black garbage bags sat on the wet grass, her clothes spilling out of a torn bag, her grandmother's old Bible, a photo frame poking through the plastic, the glass cracked across her smiling face. "She can't even afford a real suitcase," Brielle called out, laughing, the phone steady in her hand. "Everything she owns in trash bags. That's what we finally took out to the curb. Trash." "Don't waste your breath defending her, Marcus," Eleanor added, folding her arms. "Women like her always cry poor right up until they think crying might buy them something. Save your apologies for someone who earned one." Across the street, the curtains in Mrs. Okafor's front window had pulled back an inch. 2 doors down, a voice low enough that it was meant to be private, but carried anyway. "Lord, they really did her like that, right out on the lawn." Someone else murmured back, "I always wondered how long that girl would put up with this family." A third voice, quieter still, said only, "Poor thing." And that was somehow worse than anything Brielle had filmed, because pity from strangers cuts in a way mockery never does. The neighbors did not laugh, but not one of them moved to help either. Something deep inside Nadia rose up and wanted to scream. It wanted her to fall to her knees and beg. She did none of those things because Nadia had learned a long time ago that there are storms you do not argue with. So she bent down slowly. She gathered her suitcases, one in each hand. She looped the garbage bags over her shoulders. Her fingers slipped into her coat pocket and brushed against something small and cool, a worn brass key on a faded ribbon. She closed her hand around it, and for one strange second, standing there in the mud with her life in trash bags, she did not feel as poor as they all believed her to be. She turned and she walked away into the gray evening. Not one single person on that porch imagined the storm her quiet exit was about to bring. To understand Nadia, you have to go back past the city, past the little blue house, all the way back to a small house at the end of a dirt road, where a girl was raised by her grandmother. Her grandmother had very little. A leaning house, a vegetable garden out back, a creaking rocking chair on the porch, a Bible with cracked corners and 100 pressed flowers tucked between its pages. But that old woman had one saying she repeated like a prayer, morning and night, until it lived in Nadia's bones. "Baby," she would say, rocking slow, "kindness you give for free always finds its way back home. It might take years, it might come from a stranger's hand, but it always, always comes home." So Nadia grew up giving that kindness away for free. She fed the stray dogs that nobody wanted. She read out loud to the old folks down the lane whose eyes had failed them. She carried groceries and pulled weeds and sat with the lonely, and she expected nothing back, because her grandmother had taught her that a good heart is the one thing in this world that no one can ever take from you, no matter how hard they try. When Nadia was 20, an old man moved quietly into the empty house at the bend in the road. He was sharp-tongued and short with people, the kind of man the town learned to walk past quickly. His shirts were thin at the collar. He counted out exact coins at the feed store, and never a penny more. His roof leaked in 2 places he never bothered to fix, and he ate the same plain supper most nights, because, he said, fancy food was wasted on a man eating alone. The whole town gave him a wide berth, partly out of pity, and partly because nobody likes being snapped at for free. Nadia did not give him that berth. She brought him soup on cold nights. She sat with him through long gray evenings while he complained about his knees and the price of nails and people who didn't wave back on the road anymore. She asked him nothing and wanted nothing. And slowly, The sharp old man softened like bread in warm milk. The day she left that town to chase a job in the faraway city, the old man caught her wrist at his gate. He pressed something into her palm and closed her fingers over it, a worn brass key on a faded ribbon. "For the door that's always open to you," he said, his eyes wet and strange. She assumed he meant his own door, that he was simply a lonely man who didn't want to lose the only visitor he had. She thought it was nothing more than that. She kept it anyway, the way she kept every kindness, tucking it into her coat pocket where it stayed for years. That was the heart Nadia carried into Marcus's house when she married him. And tonight, that same heart was walking down a wet and darkening street, carrying everything she owned in 2 suitcases and 3 torn bags, and a small brass key to a door not one soul in the world knew anything about. The days that followed the lockout were the hardest Nadia had ever known. She found a narrow bed in a women's shelter on the east side of the city, a thin cot in a long room full of strangers. She did not give up on Marcus right away. She tried to call him, and his number was blocked. She tried the house phone, and Eleanor picked up just long enough to say, "Stop embarrassing yourself, girl," before the line went dead. Then came the morning that broke something in her for good. She walked into the bank to check the small savings account she had built over 6 years, dollar by dollar. The account was empty. Marcus had drained every cent of it, and while she sank, the rumors rose. Brielle's video had spread far beyond their street. Eleanor told everyone who would lean in close that Nadia had always been a leech, a gold digger. Marcus believed every word of it, or chose to. There was a woman in the next cot named Pearl, older, with tired eyes, who had been thrown out by her own children. One night, when Nadia could not stop the silent tears, Pearl reached across the gap between the 2 cots and held her hand in the dark. "Don't you let them make you small, baby," Pearl whispered. "I see something in you. Whatever it is, they couldn't reach it." Nadia held that stranger's hand until she fell asleep. Then the floor she still had under her feet finally gave way. She was let go from the diner where she'd worked double shifts for 3 years. "Too many missed mornings," the manager said. "Too many calls from a number he didn't recognize. Too much trouble for a job that paid this little." She didn't even argue. She just untied her apron and left it folded on the counter. A week later, the shelter posted a new notice on the board. 30-day stays only, no exceptions. Beds needed for new arrivals. Nadia's 30 days had quietly run out 3 days before. The woman at the front desk was not unkind about it, only tired, the way everyone in that building was tired. "I wish I could give you more time, honey," she said, not quite meeting Nadia's eyes. "There's a list longer than this hallway of women waiting for that cot." Nadia packed her 2 suitcases and 3 bags one more time. Pearl walked her to the door, and for once, neither of them had anything to say. Pearl just squeezed her hand once, hard, and let her go. That night, Nadia sat on a bench at the bus station because it was the only place open, the only place warm, the only place where a tired woman with 2 suitcases did not look out of place for very long. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A janitor pushed a mop in slow circles near the far wall. Every hour or so, a bus pulled in, doors hissing open, and strangers streamed past her without a glance, the way people walk past anything they have trained themselves not to see. She counted the money in her coat pocket 3 separate times, as if it might have grown between countings. It had not. $11 and some change. Not enough for a room. barely enough for 2 meals from the vending machine glowing in the corner. Its rows of chips and crackers lit up like a small, mocking shrine. She thought about calling someone. She went through the short, sad list in her head. The co-workers from the diner who had stopped texting back. The one cousin in another state she hadn't spoken to in years. The number for Marcus's phone that she had memorized without meaning to, and that she knew, with total certainty, was still blocked. There was no one left on that list. She put the phone away. A security guard walked past close to midnight, slowed near her bench, looked at her suitcases and her garbage bags and her face, and said nothing at all. He had seen this before. That was its own small mercy and its own small cruelty, both at once. She thought about her grandmother then, the rocking chair, the saying repeated like a prayer. Kindness given freely always finds its way home. Sitting on that cold bench with her life in bags at her feet, it was very hard, for the first time in her whole life, to believe it. She did not cry. She had cried so much in the weeks before this one that there did not seem to be anything left in her for it. She simply sat and watched the buses come and go, carrying other people toward other lives, and held the worn brass key so hard in her closed fist that it left a small red mark across her palm by morning. She did not know, sitting there in the buzzing fluorescent light with $11 to her name, that this bench was the lowest point of the whole long story, and that it was already, quietly, almost over. It was on a cold and ordinary Tuesday morning, sitting on that same bench with nowhere yet to be, that her phone rang. An unknown number. She very nearly did not answer it, certain it was another bill collector calling to remind her of money she did not have. Something made her press the phone to her ear anyway. It was a lawyer, a calm, careful voice, asking if she was the same Nadia who had once lived at the end of a long dirt road, the young woman who used to carry soup to a lonely old man at the bend in the lane. Her breath caught. She said, yes. Yes, that was her. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this," the voice said, "but he passed away last week. He was at peace at the end, from what I understand. He asked for you more than once in his final days. He left some instructions regarding a property and a few personal effects. Nothing complicated, but he was specific that you be present in person for the reading. It shouldn't take more than an afternoon of your time." Nadia almost laughed, the kind of laugh that comes out thin and a little broken when there is nothing else left to do with a feeling. A property, personal effects. She pictured a leaking roof and a creaking rocking chair, maybe a coffee can of old coins on a shelf, and she found, sitting there on that cold bench, that she didn't mind the thought of it at all. It would be more than she currently had to her name, which at that moment was $11 and 2 suitcases. "I can be there," she said, and for the first time in many long weeks, somewhere far away and out of sight, a door she had nearly forgotten was beginning, very quietly, to swing open. The reading of the will was held in a building Nadia had only ever seen from the outside, from across the street, a tower of glass and polished stone, where the lobby floors were so clean a person could see her own face looking back up at her. She wore the very best of her salvaged clothes that day, washed by hand and pressed flat under her mattress overnight. She walked through those tall doors with her back straight and her chin level, even as her heart shook like a leaf in a storm. And she quickly realized she was not the only one there. The room was full of well-dressed strangers, all talking in low, eager voices about a name she didn't recognize, a man whose health the papers had apparently been watching for the better part of a year. She assumed they were here for someone else's business down the hall, and there, near the front, to her complete shock, sat four people she knew far too well. Marcus, Eleanor, Brielle, and Simone, draped head to toe in glittering new things. The whole room seemed to freeze when they noticed her. Brielle's mouth dropped open. Eleanor's cold face cracked. Marcus half rose out of his chair. "What is she doing in here?" Eleanor hissed across the room. "Somebody call security." The lawyer at the front of the room looked up slowly over the rims of his glasses. "On the contrary, madam, this young woman is the only reason a single one of you was permitted through that door this morning." He lifted one page from the table. "Most of you knew the deceased only by the name on his buildings. Some of you never knew his name at all until your invitation arrived. He was, until his death, one of the wealthiest men in this state, a fact he hid so completely that even his own attorneys did not learn his full holdings until after he was gone." A murmur went through the room like wind through tall grass. Someone gasped. A man near the back stood halfway up and sat back down, pale. Eleanor's mouth opened and closed without sound. "He grew weary," the lawyer continued, "of being loved only for what he had. So he went to live poor and unknown in a small house at the bend of a country road, to see, one last time, if a single person left in this world would be kind to a stranger who appeared to have nothing." He read on, of a man abandoned by every relative who shared his blood, who found, at the end of a dusty road, one young woman who brought him soup and asked for nothing in return. Not once. Not ever. "To her," the lawyer read, and his voice did not waver, "to the only soul on this earth who treated me like a man and not like a bank, I leave everything that I have, my estate in its entirety, every last thing my name has ever touched." He looked up. "The sole heir," he said, "is a woman named Nadia." The room exploded. A chair scraped hard against the polished floor. Brielle's phone clattered out of her hand and onto the marble, the screen cracking in a thin spider web she would not notice until much later. Eleanor surged halfway out of her seat, shouting something nobody could make out over the noise, her composure gone in an instant after 6 years of never once losing it. Simone went white, then red, then white again, her hand flying to her chest as if she might actually need to sit back down before she fell. A man near the back, who had introduced himself to 3 strangers as a close family friend before the reading began, was already edging toward the door, no longer interested in staying for the rest of the proceedings now that there was nothing left in it for him. Marcus simply stared, his mouth open, no sound coming out at all, as every head in the room turned to find the only Nadia anyone there had ever heard of. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the lawyer cleared his throat once, and the room remembered itself enough to fall quiet again. She did not move. Slowly, she lifted her hand into the air and opened her fingers. There, resting on her open palm, sat a worn brass key on a faded ribbon. "He gave me this," she said softly, and the noise of the room died away to hear her. "Years ago, the day I left that town, he told me it was for the door that's always open to me. I thought it meant his door. I never once knew what it really opened. I only know I sat with him because he was lonely, and I never asked that man for a single thing back." Then she turned, slowly, and looked at them. At Marcus, at Eleanor, at Brielle, at Simone. The 4 of them sat frozen as the truth crashed over their heads like a wave they had no hope of outrunning. The woman they had called worthless on a public porch was the sole heir to one of the greatest fortunes in the state, and she had been carrying the key to it in her coat pocket the very night they laughed her down the street. "You called me broke," Nadia said, and her voice never rose, never cracked. "You stood on that porch and told the whole street I brought nothing into your lives. You were so busy counting up everything you thought I didn't have that not one of you ever stopped to see what I actually was." She let the silence stretch out long and heavy. "Letting me walk away that night was the biggest mistake of your lives." And then she simply stopped speaking, because the truth was already standing in the middle of that room, and it stood taller than every one of them. What came for them after that day did not need Nadia's hand to push it along. She had learned long ago in a small house at the end of